some parts are done by Christian, some parts by me. So we could even try if you have immediate quick questions in the chat, like both of us also following the chat. So maybe we are even addressing them right on, so you don't have to wait whatever 20 minutes before it's going to be addressed. So really don't be shy. Also, I try to watch the chat on the side when I'm talking, and probably Christian also. If we have an immediate demand for clarification, please expand on this aspect. We also try to do that right in the question. So again, that you don't have to wait until everything's done and remember everything, so you can really do it in the context. Yes, so also thank you very much to the organizers for the very kind introduction. That means we don't have to say anything about us anymore, because I think we have been thoroughly introduced, and we are talking now, as announced, and this is probably what I hear about, well, preaching to the choir. And we're starting, no, how does it work? We're starting with a visual intro of a preaching to the choir. And of course, we know that especially working in this field, it's not always appropriate to just go after the looks of people and judge people by their looks. But as a first visual impression, this is what typical science communication formats look like, or what the audience looks like. It's white, male, older, and also usually highly educated. So this is an image we've taken at one of the series of traditional evening lectures at this was at Heidelberg University. But as I said, it's only a visual introduction, but we also have data to prove prove this assumption. And you don't need to look at all the details. We did a survey at audiences at these lecture series and at another lecture series at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, the very traditional forms, science communication. And you can't see all the details, but the main message is on the left. It's the age distribution. And you see the big brownish and the big red columns that constitute, well, more than 60% of all participants, up to 70%. And that's the age group 60 to 70 and 70 plus. So they are really old joining these lectures. And on the right, that's the education level. And you see the orange bar is that they have a university degree, and the brown bar to the right of the orange bar says they even have a doctoral degree. So basically, the audience of these forms of science communication, that the status quo in many cases is 60 years or older and has a university degree already. So is that really, even question yourself if that is considered science communication, if science communication is meant as external communication, not communicating to people outside of science, when you basically only reach, well, scientists themselves or retired scientists in whichever profession. Of course, like, this is a very provocative statement, especially regarding the age, for example, a typical thing. Another thing is science festivals. Of course, there are families and there are children. So, well, there is another age distribution there. So this is a different picture, but there is an issue. And so it's worthwhile talking more about it. And this is what we have done in our research and in our project. Because the problem also theoretically is it's not only that these people are there, and so the thing is, it's not the problem that these people join science communication. Everybody's really welcome there. The problem is more that the others don't show up. And the question is, why don't they show up? Do they feel, well, that's already a spoiler probably. They feel excluded. They don't feel invited. They are thrown off by certain things and just don't meant that they're in there. And also, until very recently, most science communicators haven't really cared about it. As long as there were enough people that they can write in the report to their funding agency, we've seen 50 people and everything was fine. Nobody really questioned if it was just other academics there. And the question still remains, and it's, as I said, is increasingly being addressed, like what to do about this. And yeah, what can be done that science communication, that's where it took the quotation from our headline, that science communication can reach more than the proverbial choir and not talking to your colleagues. There has been a recent number of studies that look at this problem. Some of them we have cited on, but there's not really a systematic approach regarding what is happening. It's a very complex phenomenon. There are various factors contributing to that. And so the main result of our project, and you already see the partners there, I'm going to say something a lot about this in a minute, is that we look at the existing body of knowledge in the academic literature, but also very much in the practical literature, like practical reports, project reports, from science communication, but also, and this is also very important, from other fields, because like we in science communication, like we are not the first ones to think about this issue. The people in social work, for example, or in or cultural politics, they've been in political education, they've been dealing with that project for whatever, 30, 40 years or so. So we also took that evidence into account and tried to sort the whole thing and developed a typology of exclusion factors, which we are going to present. What constitutes the audience that is not there? And this is a theoretical problem for those. You can't measure a negative thing. You can only measure positive things. Like you can't measure a non-existence. So it's really a really tough thing how to address these exclusion things. But we tried. So the project was called Science for All, or the German Wissenschaft für alle. It's what you see in the logo that's on all the slides there. We did this some years ago when Christian and I both were at the KIT in Karlsruhe. We both know are at different universities since there was no project funding available anymore. We did it together with practice partner Wissenschaft im Dialog, im Dialog, Science and Dialogue. This is the, for those who don't know, the German organization that's basically a leading think tank and I don't know how you say it, do tank, whatever agency that is involved in many of the central science communication activities. They're trying creative formats. They're working with the ministry on central initiatives, the German Year of Science and all these things. And the funding, but also content contributions, like they didn't only get money, but also really participated in the project, came from the Robert Bosch Foundation. But they also now have changed their focus of funding. So that's also part of, oh, okay, now it's already open. I wanted to, anyway, you now see a very intimidating typology of exclusion factors. And the idea is, since we titled it Practical Insights, we don't want to go into all these details. The idea is really, okay, to have it out there. You're probably not going to, well, very surely you're not going to explain each individual of these factors. The main message is there's I would say 1 million, but if you count, you see it's 31. So okay. It feels like 1 million various factors that can lead that people are excluded from science communication activities, actively, passively, by whatever mechanisms. Our approach was to structure this into 3 layers: the individual factors, social factors, and then structural factors that are that lie on the side of the science communication activities, the science communicators, the science institutions. As you can see, of course, there immediately is an overlap between the structural ones and then the other ones, because there's an adequacy. For example, complexity might also have something to do with the formal level of education on the individual side and all these things. So there's a lot of interdependency, a lot of overlap, but really trying to put all these things into context. We took these factors from this literature review, we said, and try to what have others already found out and identified in their studies. And so that you don't have to deal with this rather unappealing table here, we thought, okay, we also should preach what we do, to stick with that preaching metaphor and really try to do science communication on this more theoretical science communication research. So we ask an artist to create it's a mixture of a comic template, an information graphic to visualize these factors. So it's something that is pleasant to look at, and of course it's very complex, but you can look at it 10 times and discover new things. On the back there's very tiny text with a lot of explanation on all these things, but the idea is we want science communicators to use that. So we also printed that as a poster, and a lot of science communicators now have it in their office. You can see it also there behind me. Also, well, I made it, so I probably don't need it, but that's the idea. Like, really, it's nice to review. You can have it in office and always look at that. Okay, so what are we actually doing? And it's available online. The link is in there, and of course you'll get the slides. But Christian probably could also just put it in the chat. But we also would be willing to send some more of the printed copies if there are a few interested people in there. I think our institutions could spare this postage. So let us know if you would be interested in that and have a look at that, because it's really more complex. And now to make it more practical again, I would like to have a short quiz in here. And so since we've done our study in Germany, the data is on Germany, but yeah, you could probably try to guess with us. And if that's even relevant, because I thought it's a complex table, 31 factors, and yeah, it's very detailed. Is it really important to know all these tiny details in there, and like what variance in there, just to get a sense of the relevance? I have 3 numbers. We don't do all of them because there's too much. So I would like you to use the chat and just write some number in there for the first question. What do you think? What percentage? And we just use full numbers. What percentage of adults in Germany are considered as functionally illiterate? This means they might have some basic reading or writing skills, but not the reading or writing skills to make use of more complex or longer text or write longer text, something that especially for written science communication is a huge barrier. So just write some numbers in the chat and then we'll look at the solution. Any guesses out there? Okay, we have 15, 10. Some more? Okay, 35. Any more guesses? We have 20. Oh. Okay, so as I say that, so you already, maybe I've talked too much or too convincing already, because usually people tend to underestimate that a lot and say, well, that's maybe 1% or 0.1%. Like, is it really, because like it's 2022, who can't write today? Like really, it's that basic, and especially in Germany, like with that, okay, the German education system is a terrible thing of its own. But no, oh no, okay, so I've clicked too much. So it's 9%. And I already revealed the second number, which also people tend to underestimate. The number of people that are severely disabled. So this is according to the official statistics. There's a status schwerbehindert to that, and there are even much more people that are affected that don't have this official status. So it's quite a relevant number to think about it. It's like, yeah, well, why should I have an accessible presentation? There are no disabled people anyway coming. No, they're out there. They're just usually often forgotten. And let's just do the first number of the last question. How many percent of people do you think in Germany from the age group of 15 or older have as a highest degree of education only primary education? So this means 4 to 7 or 8? 4 to 7 of 8 years of school. So really the most basic school that usually doesn't really also qualify for more advanced craft degrees, anything, but really the most basic school. Also, any number guesses? Okay, we have 12 and 5. Some more? 10. Yeah, I got it. You probably think you stick to the 10. 15. Okay, so I'm going to reveal it. Is indeed, it's 30%. So this is quite a lot. Like one thing it's important to note for that thing, this is a current number, or it's from 2017. So this includes many of the older people that are now in their 60s, or not in their 60s, now in their 70s, 80s, or 90s. So when they were young and went to school, it was the war or post-war period in Germany. And for them, many of the it was not standard to have a higher degree of education. They were still working in agriculture or with their parents or just unskilled labor. So of course, today, like this number is changing constantly and it's going down over the years, because today, 50% of any age cohort is even doing advanced school degrees. So this is going down, but still currently these people are there and they shouldn't be forgotten when you think about, why should I make my text chat more easy? Like everybody knows that, everybody had that in school. They should know these basic mathematical or statistical skills. Like, no, probably they don't have. So in going on, I would hand over to Christian.
Okay, thank you. Then the last number, it's 4% with no degree at all. And to come to one particular relevant exclusion factor, it's capital and habitus. Some of you are probably aware of this concept. It's originated from Pierre Bourdieu in the 80s, who was a French sociologist, and yeah, he said that besides economic capital, like money, also social and cultural capital shape society, and classes and how people navigate society and to which classes they belong. Especially relevant for us was the part of cultural capital, or what's called habitus. That's the appearance and behavior of a person, his preferences or her preferences, his habits, her habits, like what you, how you dress, what are your manner of speaking, and so on. And that's all, yeah, determines or is determined by your position in society, by your class. And specifically for science communication, this concept has been adapted and called science capital from Archer and Dawson to researchers from Great Britain, who said that there is something specifically for science, like science capital, like knowledge about scientific methods, knowledge about scientific language, and so on, that you need to have to consume science communication, or for science communication offers to be accessible for you. There are also some other factors which are empirically tested, like you see here from a survey from the US. Some factors like ideology or party and age, and their influence on some positions, like should childhood lessons safe or not. That depends strongly on your age or on your race and ethnicity, like also the use of animals in research. Those are all questions which affect science or which are affected by science. And you see that there are some factors which are influencing them. And I think Corona showed that these, that they can have real-world consequences on the behavior of people. So what did we do? We combined in our project qualitative and quantitative methods. On the quantitative side, we did a survey analysis of it's called Wissenschaftsbarometer or Science Barometer for 3 years. It's a representative survey for the German population and their use of science and their attitudes towards science. And we could show that there is a connection between some exclusion factors which are in the survey, like age, and different indicators like visits to public lectures or interest in science. The statistical analysis shows that the proximity to science is, for example, a strong explanatory factor for using scientific or science communication offers. Education, age, gender, and income are significant only for some indicators. And migration, background, and religiousness, contrary to what we suspected, is only seldom significant for the indicators in the survey. The exclusion factors taken together are especially influential for cognitive indicators, which are indicators that determine determine behavior, like going to a museum. That's a cognitive indicator. Our qualitative case study, we worked with 3 underrepresented audiences, did case studies with them. One were residents of a marginalized city quarter in Berlin that still has a high unemployment rate, a high proportion of people with a migration background, and so on. Bad infrastructure, no research facilities in this quarter, and so on. Then vocational students in a craft in Karlsruhe, which was a class from a Berufsschule, is the German term, that were learning a craft, and young Muslims with a migration background, again in Berlin, because there we found a cooperation partner. We did interviews and focus groups with these people, and ask what they expect from science and science communication, what they use or what they don't use, and why they don't use, so to see if there are some exclusion factors that that they are affected for. To show you one insight or exemplary insight from one group, the students in vocational training. You can see here education and habitus gets mentioned by them. For example, one participant said that one often thinks that they, scientists, are much more cleverer than we are, and therefore they don't go to science communication events because they think they are too, stupid, to put it in plain language. They see a difference in the milieu or in the class they come from in comparison to scientists or students at universities. And they see themselves as that they work with hands in contrast to scientists who work with their brains. So there's a different perception, self-perception between them. Then another exclusion factor mentioned was time. During daytime, there's only work, and in the evening, one has not much time, and school wears us out too. So they don't go to a lecture in the evening at the university because they just don't have time and don't have energy because they are working all day long. So that's one factor, or another one is that they think that there's a disinterest by science communicators to them. So they see that the university only goes to the grammar schools or gymnasium and don't goes to their Berufsschule or to students in vocational training. And so they think they are not interested in them. So what are the results for all three groups? All groups are interested in science, which is interesting because they hardly consumed science communication. They mentioned different reasons, material factors like lack of local offerings and infrastructure, missing financial resources to pay entrance fees for museums, for example, lack of time resources, and language barriers. So too much complicated language or English, which they don't understand. But also emotional factors like fear, frustration, and insecurity. So they fear that they appear to be stupid if they ask a question in a lecture, for example. They see an emotional and habitual distance, like I showed on the slide before, the work with hands, work with brains. And they think that they are not seen as or not perceived as a science person. So there's a self and external perception that science is just not for us. They don't see themselves as a target group for science communication, and so they don't use the offerings. That's also published in a paper with more detail, of course. So if you're interested, just Google it. What we already said, it should be more practical. That was very much on research and our results. Now it's some more practical learnings from the literature review and also from our focus group and interviews. We put together 7 practical recommendations. The first one is that start with listening. So you should try to listen to the interests of your target audience. You should try to reduce the distance and be accessible. So for example, use plain language. You should try to be relevant for everyday life. So you should find some kind of connection, which could be some kind of your content should be relevant for the people, for their everyday problems. You should go where people are. So instead of staying at your university, you should probably go to a city quarter, go to a youth club, and so on if you want to reach new groups. Cooperation is key. So you have to cooperate with local associations, multiplicators, stakeholders, and so on, who know the target audience and who are trusted by the target audience, so that they trust you in the end. You should at the same time mind the openness paradox. That is the trend for participation and leaving everything for debate might be yeah, might be bad for people who are not seeing themselves as experts and therefore or don't know the content very well, are no experts and therefore maybe reluctant to say something. And you should implement long-term activities to build trust and to have a lasting impact. That's also yeah, I think that's maybe the most important point, because often such projects are just one-time activities. You come to the city quarter, you do some one event. We will show you the event which we did, and the people maybe like it, and it may be a success. But then there is no follow-up. There will be no other event in the next years because it's just a one-time event. Funding was just for a one-time event, and then you don't have a lasting impact. Also, there's an article about this. Maybe Philipp can also share this, post the link. Now, what did we with the 3 groups? We, after our focus groups and interviews, we implemented 3 pilot projects with the people, with the 3 target groups. The first one, it's a research rally, which we did in the city quarter in Berlin. It was 2 hours on an afternoon next to primary school, so children could come over after school was over. The stalls were staffed by research institutions, museum, university, and so on. And there were stations with team tasks for children and parents. So they could do some tasks, get a stamp on a card for it, and afterwards got something to drink and something to eat as and a little gift as a reward. About 150 participants took part in it, and the evaluation showed that this event indeed reached new groups which had not before visited science communication offerings like museums or universities or lectures and so on. And people were overall highly satisfied with the event. And also the research institutions told us that it was very good to be in the city quarter, because so they met people who would never come to their usual offerings at the university, at the campus, or at the museum. The second project was a science poetry slam that was together with the young Muslims with a migration background, again in Berlin, in a youth club. You see some pictures here. It was also 2 hours long. It was in the evening, as I said, in a youth club in Berlin. We had 7 slammers on the stage, 4 poetry and 3 science. That's because in the group or the club with which we cooperated said that poetry slams were an established format for these young people. They knew that, they went there, it was very popular, so we thought about combining it with a science slam. The 3 science slammers had all a migration background, so to reduce the distance between them and the people there and the audience. There were about 60 to 70 participants in the evening. The evaluation showed that only partly new groups could be reached. There was still a very high level of people with an Abitur or higher educated. And there was a general satisfaction with the event, but some need for improvements on details like timing or where to do that and so on. And the last one was a science poetry slam we did in Karlsruhe with the vocational students. Again, 2 hours in the evening. You see a pattern there. It was in an event location in Karlsruhe, 4 rounds of questions, general, craft, and 2 science, and in between 2 short talks from scientists, like 5-10 minutes, very oriented on being entertaining. About 80 participants took place, and so the location was full. However, we hardly reached any new groups. There were many students or staff from the university and only some people from the vocational school. the general satisfaction was there, but there were significant need for improvements. For example, it would have been better to do that event maybe at the school, so that for the students, it would have been easier that they come to us. So that was a short, not so short, but very condensed summary of our activities in the project and our results. Maybe Philipp wants to add some points, I don't know. Otherwise, he can take over for the next and last part of our presentation.
No, so I don't think I want to add something. The question is if there's any immediate question for that, if we should finish the presentation, we want to have a discussion afterwards. Just if there are no urgent requests, I don't see anything. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, then I'm just going to continue and then we can have a talk afterwards. So these were the 3 projects we, well, as Christian presented, did in the project in a very detailed way with a lot of accompanying research and data taking and a very intense participatory planning project. But there are also some other practical experiences we want to share that also follow this idea in probably in a less structured way, and are sometimes a very specific focus. But for the purpose of this, since we promised practical recommendations, we thought we need to give more practical insights. So you may have noticed that for all of for 3 of these things, these were on-site events, like in-person events. This is now for this project. This was not an intentional choice. So as Christian said, like we developed them in a participatory way and with the groups of stakeholders, with multipliers from these groups, and they all, in the respective case, came up with the idea of this on-site format. Online formats or video formats would have been possible. Some were also briefly discussed, but they weren't chosen in the end. So that's why they were on site. But to show you also some things that work digitally. Oh no, wait. I need to. Okay. Now I can advance, right? Yes. So there's one project that was done, cooperation of the WWF and okay, now I forgot the name. Christian, can you jump in? The who did the Earth Overshoot Day campaign? The WWF and
good question. Next question.
Okay, anyway, I'll put it in the chat shortly afterwards.
Mesh Collective.
Oh, Mesh Collective, right? That's basically also on video and TV think tank working on this thing, and they had the approach, and this is probably something many people think about. Okay, we need something cool and hip. Okay, so we need to work with influencers. But so in their case, the approach was not having whatever some influence, like buying an influencer for an advertising campaign, but really have them deal with a topic they are interested in a way they want to do it, and to do it towards their community. Like, not the university is paying an influencer 2,000 euros that they make a voiceover for the usually shitty video on the university YouTube channel that no one watches, but they were producing a video, they made the final production decisions, and they published it on their usual, in this case it was YouTube, on their YouTube channel. And so the forms are very different. Here you see it's just a screenshot. He basically did a music video where they were debating in this two-side rap thingy, and the arguments for and against vegetarianism, veganism, like the environmental effects of meat consumption and all these things. And that was really nice to watch. Like the other one, it was a travel blogger, or not a pure travel blogger, but also doing things. And then, of course, then he was then doing a tour to a piece of beach, and was talking about pollution, ocean pollution, and he was going to a wildlife center there. So something that's catered to the interest of his channel and his audiences. And the third one, she's a lifestyle, a little bit beauty, not a typical beauty blogger, but she was talking about these topics to her audience in this case. So really trying to bring these topics in these communities, and we have some data on that. There was a thesis investigating, like, how do these audiences then react? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really having okay. How these audiences react on the comments, because do they think, okay, well, now we are forced to be educated, we are following this channel, we want to have some beauty, travel, lifestyle, whatever advice, and we don't care about the science stuff. And so on the left, we see we did an analysis of all the comments below the respective YouTube videos, and you see and see, did they comment on the topic choice? Like, so the hypothesis was, if people don't like it, they would complain like, I really don't like that, do sustainability topics or environmental topics, stick with the other things. And this was totally not the case. You see the big group, so the majority didn't mention the topic, just more like whatever, nice video or well done or whatever. But if comments addressed the topics, this is the green bar, they addressed it in a positive way. Like, okay, well, that's interesting. Nice that they're doing this, or an interesting topic. Great that you pick that up. So it does really work bringing the science topic to these audiences, and not, again, like having your video, having the influencer on your own YouTube channel, your project's video channel, or the university video channel wouldn't reach any new audience at all because, well, they just don't go there. However, if these audiences that have been reached really were educationally disadvantaged young people, couldn't be really evaluated because, well, we don't have any social demographic data on the YouTube viewers. They don't have detailed social demographic information on their followers. There's just some impressions, so there's no hard evidence available for it, but at least some indications, I would say, probably. And the second one is a project I am currently doing, and that's why I want to share it with you. So I don't have any data on that, but this is another area, reaching people in rural areas. Science communication mostly happens in cities. So in university cities, and there is a lot of talks. There are the science festivals, there are the science pubs, like all these creative things, the science labs, they happen usually in university cities. And the large areas, depending on the country, but also for Germany, there's quite a region of Germany. There's probably cities with 10,000 inhabitants, or small cities with 5,000 inhabitants, or small villages with 1,000 or less inhabitants. Like, there is no science communication. And so this is the project, we called it Heimspielwissenschaft, or homecoming science. I don't know how can I say that. What's Heimspiel in English? Home match, whatever. Like it's a soccer metaphor. And the idea is that scientists that come from rural areas and now do research wherever else, they go back to their home region and just give a talk in their local bar, in the local sports club, and just talk about their science there. But they're probably personally known there. There might be a relation to the region. So this is a picture of one of the first events. You see it's in a typical bar in my home region, or my wider home region, not complete without the Wurstplatte that can be seen there. But so he's an historian, and so he invited the people from the local. There's a history history. What's fine? History club there. And so they say, okay, what does the professor do? And for a lot of others now also doing this and saying they're going back and talk to their friends in the soccer club. It's like, okay, now you're an engineer now. Tell us how this and that work, or stem cells, is it dangerous or not? And this is really the idea, and it's working good so far, and we're really happy about that, and see how this is going to play out over the year. And now, since it has been introduced, I also want to say, okay, well, I'm not talking about my research here about the apocalypse and what we are doing. If there are questions, maybe I can answer something at the end. But what we actually do, since it was mentioned in my introduction, I'm not only doing research and research area coordination here, but I'm responsible for our science communication of the center. So I'm tasked with that responsibility. This includes the more standard things that are, well, sometimes interesting, sometimes boring, but have to be done. Like whatever press work, if there are any press requests, so we do a press release, or take care of our newsletter, or our currently still terrible homepage, our social media channels. But for example, social media, like we are present on Twitter and on Mastodon currently now, but this is, well, it's partially science communication, but to be honest, like on Twitter, we are communicating with other interested academics, with the interested nerd community, and there might be occasionally some people that don't have a lot of relations to science, but the majority of our followers are other colleagues, interested people from the arts community. So it's like more a peer communication, I would say there. So this is not really reaching out. But for reaching out, we are engaging in various creative cooperations and also try to go to new places and make use of new things. So one thing would be, and of course it aligns well with my own interests, my research interests, but also very much, of course, with my personal interests. So we said, okay, well, the apocalypse, that's a very interesting topic. There are a lot of apocalyptic role plays and apocalyptic board games out there. So we went to the local game store and said, okay, should we do a game day there? and they were happy with that, and we did it. And so we could reach these people. Of course, I would say also in this, like this was the first example, we didn't do a formal surveys there. I would guess that it's also a high percentage of academics there. So, but this is only the first try. We want to expand that, also create other, get other people involved with that, with the having the games provide access and then talking about the topic, not inviting about a talk, but we want to probably still including another 15-minute talk about one of the research topics. But besides that, have a nice and pleasant gaming experience. Or another bigger thing, there was a urban art festival here in Heidelberg last summer, or well, the festival is each year, but last summer we cooperated with that urban arts festival, and also really reaching the community that goes there. So we had invited an urban artist from Mexico, and with one of our fellows was also from Mexico, and they created a large mural here in the town of Heidelberg that can be seen publicly, and people are joining it especially from the Latino community here in Heidelberg, and discussing about it, because they was also picking up topics on that issue. But also for children, like we did a children's book reading on, there's a children's book, The Best World Endings, by the way, a very great book, unfortunately only available in German so far. So also talking to kids and their parents about our research, and the cinema evening, and people could leave their opinion there. So we really got this whole audience there and could engage with talks. We were also present there for speaking with these people that wouldn't join probably a scientific talk, but would go to an urban arts festival for the music or for the art, and then also still would engage with us and our topics there. The cinema idea, we also continue further during the year, like showing movies and then have a short scientific commentary or scientific input on the movie, like whenever, if there's the robot apocalypse, and of course we did an AI researcher talking, okay, really what's the AI doing there, or a film researcher putting some movie in context. We also did it with school classes, like this on the right side. I did myself this year, last year, 2022, on the movie Soylent Green, which was filmed in 1973, but the fictional time of the movie was 2022. So this was a very interesting occasion, talking with these students. And these were also explicitly students from vocational training, as in our pilot project, like not the typical academic pathway students, but they did, I'm not sure what class they were. I think they were in Kaufmann, like in trade school, basically, and talking about the environmental implications of that movie and what their opinions are in there. So these are just some of the examples how we also try to do this, not since the research project has ended. Also now I'm trying to do this in my current practical work and reaching out to new audiences, and not only have our typical, of course, we have a public lecture series, but yeah, who goes there? Like, I'm even bored sometimes myself, but really trying to make the topic accessible and create discussions and engage with others. And that being said, this is just our last slide, but we also probably put the link again in the chat. And if you want to add a paper copy, so the email address is wrong, please don't use that, since we're not working at KIT anymore, but Google us or write us the email, or we could also put our email in the chat and we will send you a paper copy of the poster. But before that, we are happy to try to answer any question or comment or whatever you might have.
Thank you very much for your talk and your presentation. It was really, really useful. And I think then I will let to Gianmaria to start the discussion. And of course, if any of the participants have questions, feel free to use the chat, Q&A, raise your hands, talk directly. I mean, whatever you want, interact as you prefer.
Well, first of all, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Philip, for this brilliant presentation, the overview of your research, your work on the topic. So I wonder, let me ask the participants, does anyone have a question? Wants to, because I have a couple, more than one actually, more than two. But does anyone wish to ask? Okay, let me start. I'll start. And going back to the recommendations, I wonder whether you can elaborate a bit more on the openness paradox, because that got my curiosity, my attention a bit. So I wish to know a bit more. And then a second one. I'll keep the third question I have for the for the end. Again, in the recommendations, recommendation number one or number two, number one I think was, or number two was reduce the distance and be accessible. Now, there is a meaning of accessibility, being accessible. There is the one that we have in the dictionary, right? So anyone can, it's a very broad one. And then there is a more technical meaning. There is concerns accessibility as also a series of specific solutions and services to reach the specific needs of specific audiences. For example, blind persons, blind individuals, or deaf individuals, or so. I was wondering, did you worked as from a research point of view? So, did you investigate this type of accessibility, more technical use of accessibility solutions in science communication, because in order to reach deaf audiences, deaf there are that speak sign language, and those who don't speak sign language. For the second one, for the latter, we need subtitles, intralingual subtitles, for example. For the first one, we need sign language. So do you have any, did you investigate this? And if not, at least what is your opinion based on your experience about this? Because it's accessible can mean far too many things in a way. And then I'll keep my third question for later.
Okay, I'm happy to start, and then Christian, you're more than welcome to join or contradict whatever I'm saying. So starting with the first one, the openness paradoxon, is a thing that especially in communities that engage with creative open science communication and participatory forms like that want to go beyond these, overcome old forms of, okay, we just need to educate the public, but we need to empower them, we need to engage them. We saw this tendency, and we kind of really prove it empirically that it's everywhere, or the number, but it is out there that, you know, they're very well-meaning, they're very participatory. Like, we need to do a workshop, we need to empower people, we need to let them formulate their own research question, because, you know, everything else is just, you know, still education, but they should be actively involved in research and should tell us what they're doing, and whatever, with fancy methods and the cards and digital tools, like really sharing and things. And that's quite a lot. And we made this experience very specifically when we're talking to people. So when we went to Spandau, because that was already a hypothesis, we started with asking people, okay, what do you think, or what do you associate when we say science or research? And I don't have the exact number in my head, you can look it up. 70 to 80% of these people just had nothing in their mind. So really, we thought, okay, the big topics that we are always discussing, stem cell research, animals, nuclear energy, whatever, all these things. And no, that's just not a topic at all for them. They don't have any relation to science or research. They're worried about their immediate life. They need to think about, okay, I need to secure my job. I don't know what with my children, and they have to go in school. Like, they have no need for science. Well, indirectly, of course, but it's just not present in their everyday life. And if you approach these people and say, okay, we want to, so I'm now really exaggerating, no one is doing it in a form, but just for the argument, we want to empower you, just formulate your research priorities, because you should be heard in the German research agenda setting. Like, no shit, like that's absolutely not relevant. So you might even, they say, okay, no, I don't want to formulate anything. I maybe would be happy to, it looks interesting, I would be very, very happy to listen to something, and maybe I'm getting more interested in it. Maybe next time I'm also willing to ask a question, and maybe if I'm there for 2 or 3 meetings, maybe I'm willing to say something. But really having people that are not used to be integrated in the system, demanding everything from them at the very beginning, creates a huge barrier and say like, oh, well, I'm totally unsure. I didn't know anything about the topic. Now there's a room full of 30 people and I'm forced to publicly say my opinion on something. Like, no, that's not my world. And so this is what you mean.
Just that, I think that's often also a problem in citizen science projects. So that the requirements to actually do citizen science are very high, and thus citizen science is not as open as it's often communicated.
And regarding the second question, so first of all, in this practical recommendation, we meant it in the say literal day-to-day meaning and not in the technical meaning. Really, as a person being accessible, this could mean a technical thing, but it really more about, are you out there? Are you willing to listen? How you present yourself? It very much relates to this whole thing of habitus and science capital or cultural capital that Christian briefly touched on from the theoretical perspective. Like, you're not coming up full suited to your like with your typical thing. It's like, okay, so let's hear your questions. And I think, what's that arrogant asshole over there? But no, of course, probably no one is doing this, but again, like to make the argument, and also really trying to be there and listen to that and not seem like a distant academic that isn't totally not related to this thing. And but regarding the second part of the question, of course, this was part of our discussions with probably with two things. First of all, well, in many things, it's not only a technical thing, it's just a legal requirement, usually that many people ignore. For example, for official organizations, and I think it's European-wide, if you provide documents, if you have official websites, they need to be accessible to these accessibility standards, meaning all texts for images and all these things. But there's much more on the technical side. For example, which we did in our project, also just as an experimental thing, there's this kind easy language or simple language, which can be used by people with learning disabilities, but also by people with for second language learners. And so we added also that. We did a easy language, a simple language, I don't know what the English word for it is, for our project description, like, and all these other things. What we did encounter, that's something to keep in mind. This is very interesting, but we didn't want to focus on any of these aspects in detail, so we didn't go beyond this first, this first impression that these, well, it's not only the technical, but all these accessibility requirements, they might create contradictions. So if you say there's something that people are not speaking the language, like a visual depiction is very helpful to explain something. A photo is communicating much more than complex words. Also, for example, for people who have these reading or writing impairments and are not that fluent anymore. So, okay, well, show pictures, show things. But of course, you immediately know that would exclude people with viewing disabilities. And talking about languages, like, if you think about, okay, we want it to be accessible, it should be German because maybe immigrants might not speak German, but yeah, you kind of do it in 20 languages, so let's do English, that's the international language. But yeah, many people don't speak English, for example. And then, okay, how do you deal with that? And so many of these things, you cannot really find a good solution. Some might be, you just have to have two options. I'll say, okay, well, no, this is one thing that's focused on and we're very well aware of. If there are other people interested in that, we think about having, for example, a second event or a second piece of information out there. But some of these things you cannot really solve. But, and then I finish, several of these technical things are also very easy to do. And this is, we started to do, and I think we didn't publish it on the project, but we published it on a different project that I did for Wikimedia. Like all the very small things you can do without any financial costs and with little to no effort to increase the accessibility, to make your science communication more accessible and having the technical accessibility, for example, on Twitter. Well, it still exists, like, I don't know if half a year from now, but so for example, if you're using pictures, always put an image description in there, because a lot of people don't do that. And this is just a very basic thing, and then would be back at the technical accessibility.
Thank you so much to the two of you for this. I see that Ruben, you switch on the camera, so I wonder whether you have this is a sign because you have a question.
It's a sign. Maybe it's not really a question, but just also a sort of asking your opinion and what do you think could happen in the future? So my reflection would be, we have seen also within, for example, us, we are from the Marie Curie, and we were under the MCAA actions, so all the actions, so writing grants and trying to get the grant for projects and individual project and things like that. And we have seen recently that the switch is going into putting the science communication as one of the priority also to gain the grant and have the money to develop and then discuss your result within the public, so the outreach and all these things. So having seen that this step is happening or already happened, do you see in the future, how would you try to implement the accessibility to help also in terms of communication, so accessibility, reach more diversity? Do you think it's something that could be feasible to like have as a mandatory task in a European grant or in a request, or do you think we're still very far from this point of view?
Of course, I have an opinion, but also Christian, I don't know, do you want to share one?
I don't have an opinion.
Okay, then
No.
I can start.
No, I think it would be very good, but you have also to be a bit careful. I think because you can't include everyone, as Philipp said, there are some trade-offs, and for other measures there are also trade-offs, and you include one, you may exclude another. So I think it would be good if the projects or in the funding proposal, you would think about who you want to reach and why you want to reach them. So that would help a lot to be more strategic in your science communication, more targeted. And also I think there should be more evaluation. So even to look at what was the impact of the science communication, who did they reach, and so on. And often the evaluations are not mandatory, and when they are done, then the data is not public, so you don't have a benchmark and so on. So I think that would help to make evaluations maybe mandatory and give extra funds for that, and to make the funding more tailored towards targeted science communication instead that people just write, I want to do a lecture and so on. Yeah.
Probably just briefly adding to that, also using it strategically. I agree, of course, as Christian said, like we chose the topic Science for All for our project. Like we know that there wouldn't be Science for All, but it was just a nice catchy title, so we did use it anyway. But if you're now thinking for a specific project, the one thing that Christian already mentioned, is there some group or some parts, because also we didn't talk about that. Talking about groups is also difficult because group implies homogeneity and all these things. But again, it's a whole different theoretical problem. And that is specifically relevant for your research, or your research is specifically relevant for them, then this is, of course, would be the first thing actually to do. Like if you're working on some ecosystem, like talking with the population next to that, or some technical thing, maybe the potential user group or a potential group that might be affected by that technology, or I don't know. So these are the easiest way, going really there and say, okay, are they there? Or if there are more groups, then say, okay, well, everybody is talking about these and these users of technology, but they are often overlooked. And I really specifically now want to focus the communication in my project, because you cannot communicate everything, having really a specific tailored approach and argumenting. There is a lot on the other things and a lot on the basic thing, but for my project, I really want to fill this gap and also focus my science communication. And this also means like not reaching, when usually everybody thinks, okay, thinking of the big scientists that appear on television and reach millions of people like that. No, that's not going to happen with your project, very, very likely. But focus on someone. And if there's a small community and we reach 50 people there and have very nice in-depth discussions with them and have probably also nice qualitative evaluation of that, that's perfectly fine for that case. On the other hand, like if you say, oh, I want to reach everyone and have a big public talk and 50 people show up, then that's definitely a fail. So probably even focusing on something specific even makes it easier for your science communication. And the second thing would be, even if the topic itself does not really have necessarily a specific group you want to include, you still can say, okay, I'm doing this topic and this is potentially relevant for everyone, or maybe it's not even relevant for anyone because it's a theoretical topic, but I still would be very interesting to talk about it. And and something you are interested in thinking about. Wouldn't it be nice? So for example, a prison population is something. So I know of two people, like one here is in Heidelberg, he's a philosopher, and he's doing courses in philosophy and argumentation with prison inmates, with young prison inmates, just as kind of education outreach thing. So that's not associated with a project, but you could think about something else, like, well, not in the education that they need to learn something, but really engaging with it as a broader education project. Another one was doing it with basic physics outreach, also going to populations in prison. And you could probably think of 100 other such things. Okay, well, they are not really included. They have things, and wouldn't it be great to do a nice project with them? And I would like to do that.
Thanks, that's great. Then
thanks so much. Let's see if there are any questions. If you have questions, just switch on your mic and ask Christian and Philipp. Anyone? No. So let me ask you this. It's something that my third question, something that Philipp already mentioned towards the end, so kind of spoiler, towards the end of his first answer. And it's about languages and multilingualism and having a dominant language. And I really just wish to have your personal point of view, Philipp and Christian, about this, which is a kind of conundrum. And it's a very debated topic on the one side. On the other side, it's also kind of ignored. So there is this kind of a paradox. But and there has at least these two levels. One is within research, so you as researchers, okay, and then the other is within science communication, research communication. I just want to have your opinion on this. How do you see, how do you stand? What's your opinion on having a dominant language versus multilingualism and kind of improvement of multilingualism in at the very least in science communication can help us reach get closer to that for all, with that hypothetical for all. So just your opinion on this.
You are still muted, but I think for internal science communication, there's no problem with English, I would say. That maybe make it more accessible internally. But you're right, externally, I would say that multilingualism is necessary because local populations often don't speak English or don't speak that good English because it's an expert content, expert language then. That might be easier in your mother tongue than in English. So I would say yes, multilingualism is a necessary factor, and you have to look who you want to reach and what is their language that they speak most often.
Yeah, I cannot say. But I would say the same as Christian, and also adding it starts even with the naming thing, and we recognize this of ourselves because we are so much used to it, and even in our project you could say it was a negative example, but okay, so the groups themselves decided on these things, so they used it themselves. But you know, we did it in Germany here, and it was a science pub quiz, and it was a science poetry slam, and okay, it was the Forschungsrallye. Okay, that's, yeah, I could probably say. So like even in the naming things, and when you think about new forms, you think about all these fancy things, and of course sometimes it might be okay, and especially if you work with pop cultural references, many of these English terms are well known. Even if you don't speak English, you might, but it still transports something. And thinking about this language issue, it's not easy. We really hear it, especially at CAPAS, like we have it's a real big problem. Like English is the working language is our center, since we're working with international research fellows, and of course we have the So we try to reach an international audience, but we try to reach the Heidelberg local audience, but we also try to reach, for example, international local audiences. As I said, with this special project, there's a large Latino and Spanish-speaking community in Heidelberg, and then trying to do something in Spanish, and then this becomes problematic. I do speak very, very little Spanish and understand a bit more of it. Then we need to find translators for that and create the content, but really deciding for each format specifically and saying, what can we do and what should we do? Of course, you cannot have everything in every language on the planet, and you need to make the decision, but at least it should be a conscious decision. Say, okay, we do this one, for example, for our cinema series. We say we show English films in original language with the subtitles. Usually that's English with German subtitles. And so we cover two, and then the talks, some of them are English, some of them are German. We say that's okay for us. We have a mixture. We announce it beforehand, and then people also can make a choice. But of course, then English-speaking people cannot join, or non-German-speaking people cannot join a German talk, for example.
Thank you so much, because this is a topic very close to my heart. Let's give the last opportunity, the final opportunity to participants to ask a question if they have. If not, you have the email in the chat, Christian's email and Philipp's email, so you can reach, write them if you have anything, a follow-up. Since I see no questions and no one raise a hand or switch on the mic, I'd say, Ruben, that we can conclude our seminar and thank Christian and Philip for this presentation, which we've been trying to do for quite some time. So finally we made it. Well, and Ruben and I have been discussing of inviting you way before we wrote the email, so the invitation email. So that's finally we did it. We're happy we were able to do it. Thank you so much for this. And hello everyone, and bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you again. Bye. Bye.
Bye.